what is the value of a procurement team? It's so hard. You have that push and pull between, yes, I want to deliver cost savings. Yes, I want to impact the P&L, but also I'm so much more than that.
We'll start with the fun one. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
What I wanted to be was actually a teacher. Because
Okay.
the first people that I got inspired by were my teachers. Amazing women. And there were some men too, but predominantly women, but just amazing, strong women who were mothers, balancing a lot of other responsibilities, and also being so patient and teaching and imparting knowledge to kids, which I think now as a mom, I know how hard it is. And so, even more so, I see why I was so inspired. But that's what I wanted to be a teacher. And then as I grew up, I thought often, oh, I should be a professor. I should step it up and do that.
So what happened? How you ended up in procurement?
Yeah, how did I end up in procurement? I speak to so many procurement people. I think I know maybe two people who intentionally came into procurement. I'm not one of them
I
all.
don't know anyone.
Oh, I'll have to introduce you then. I'll have to introduce you to these people. I started out as a mechanical engineer. So that was my undergrad. I got into mechanical engineering because I wanted to be just like my father. He's a mechanical engineer. And I told him, I want to be like you. Like, I want to have your confidence. And he said, well, if you want this confidence comes from being an engineer. So I think that's the right path for you. So that's what I did. As soon as I finished that, I landed a job as one of the two women engineers on a shop floor. They'd never hired women before. I just busted my way through. And, some things you do when you're really young. And if you ask me, will I do it today? I don't know. I have so many hangups today. But at that time, it just felt like the right thing to do, right? To ask for a job and to say, you should employ me. You should change your policy. And the organization was so welcoming. They were so inclusive that
That's
they said,
awesome.
yeah, we've never done it before, but yes, you're right. We should do this. I had my best time learning there. I was a production planning engineer, learned so much in such a short time. And it was all of that experience just told me that, yes, operations management, this is my field. I enjoy the walks on the shop floor. I enjoy talking to all these different people, learning, and every day was learning. I think that's how I would characterize myself, a perennial student, right? Like, just if you told me, like, when they asked this question, if you had $1 million, what would you do? I would be studying. That's all I would be doing. So for me, after that, I got my MBA in operations management. And that's when I landed in procurement. My thought process at that time was, I think of the supply chain as three independent legs, right? There is the incoming materials, that's the procurement leg. There is the in process, the manufacturing leg, and then there is the distribution, the outgoing. At that time, my thought process was, okay, I've done one stint in the manufacturing, the in process area that was in equipment manufacturing. So I said, okay, let me move to a completely different industry and in a completely different leg of the supply chain. And that's when I entered into procurement.
Okay.
And I think as many procurement people might say, once you're there, like you're there. I didn't know that. And I don't know if I had known that,
You're
would I have
trapped.
still read? Well, yeah, I don't know if I would have still done that, but that's how I got into procurement. I got into nutraceutical manufacturing. I worked for GlaxoSmithKline. And that's where I got my first taste of what good procurement really looks like, what structured procurement is. I still remember when I got into procurement, there were so many jokes from family members, from friends. People were like, oh, you can make a lot of money. The old
You can
school
spend
thought.
all of the money.
They were like, oh, you bribes, right? Kickbacks. We can make jokes about it. That
Well,
at times before I joined, I was like, am I even doing the right thing? But once I joined, this is the most strategic, you know, job. Like in anything in procurement, that's the most strategic profession that I've personally lived.
yeah. When I started in procurement, the joke was about, yeah, woman used to spend a lot of money, so you are in the right place. I'm like, oh,
Thank you.
yeah, I don't like that joke, but that's fine.
I thank it. Sometimes we just laugh through it, right? Because every
Um,
battle is not worth fighting.
Yeah. And I love what you said about learning. I feel you. This year, I have banned from my husband from signing to any school because usually every year I just find myself some project, something new that I have to learn. And of course, I'm the type of person that I just pull much on myself and then, everybody suffers. So no more school, Kate, this year, please.
What do you have planned for next year?
I don't have any plans. I just finalized my MBA last year.
Okay.
So that's why my husband said, okay, this year, please nothing. Please no.
Yeah, I had the MBA
We
might
just
have been.
survived. We went through that. We survived somehow. Let's jump to the other question. At what point you switch gears and decided to focus on being a consultant? What happened there? Like, what made you to take that leap?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I've never wanted to be a consultant. When I was in the industry and when my experience with all the consultants that I'd worked with, right, was very much like because being in industry is very different, especially consulting without an industry background. A lot of the consultants I had worked with fresh out of, grad school or, Ivy League undergrad programs, and they're in the business world. And then, they're looking at a bunch of numbers on spreadsheets or looking at something theoretically and then saying, hey, this is how reality should flow based off of this logic. And while again, not to knock on any of those, I think there are some great ideas too, especially ideas that come because you have, you don't have the baggage of the industry itself. You're not coming in with preconceived ideas about how things should be done. So there's definitely merit in that. However, majority of the time it tends to be very impractical, right? The advice tends to be impractical. Every chance that I had after my MBA, my second master's here in the US, every chance I had to get into consulting, I said, no, I don't want to be a consultant. However, at one point in 2021, the height of COVID, managing a family of young kids, I got completely burned out. I could not do corporate America anymore. That's when I intentionally took a pause and I said, okay, let me really reevaluate. I will be 40 in a couple of years. What are my priorities really? How do I balance what really gets me going? How do I balance that? And surprisingly, the answer was consulting at that point. Maybe it was very selfish, but I spent a lot of time like self-inquiry and building that self-awareness to say, what is it that really motivates me? And I realized, oh yeah, I'm a data nerd, that's for sure. I love analysis. I love listening to data. I love converting looks like a bunch of numbers into actionable insights. And of course, I love sharing those insights and telling people what to do. So it's like, oh my God, this job really leads to consulting. Because isn't that what consultants do? But this time I felt a lot more confident because I actually know what industry looks like. I know how to make that advice practical in the context of, yeah, this is what the numbers tell you, but I understand that you can't always implement it because of such and such reasons. I've lived your life in your shoes. I think then it felt like, okay, I can be a different type of consultant and an operator turned consultant. That's what led me down that path. So far, still really enjoying it, especially today, like in the current environment. I was just talking to a friend yesterday in procurement. We were just sharing notes on the tariffs and listening to their take on what they're going through on a daily basis with the constant switching and everything. I told them, I'm so glad I'm not in industry at this point in time. It's definitely my job as a consultant is much less stressful than having to be in industry at this time, trying to navigate all of those changing regulations.
Okay, so we are still a consultant, right?
I'm still
okay.
still a procurement consultant. So Trivista is a management consulting firm headquartered in California. Started out in the late 2000s. Trivista originally started out providing due diligence for private equity firms as they were looking to buy or sell businesses. Trivista's core is operations. The management team, all of the associates, everybody has been an operator at some point in their lives. And we're bringing all of that rich operator experience to bear on the mid-market and private equity and even large corporations, right? So we're bringing that rich operations experience to say, how can this be better, right? Like how can your if you're a private equity player looking to acquire a business, yes, you're doing your quality of earnings, but how are you taking care of your quality of operations analysis? Because a lot of times private equity companies don't have expertise in industry. What Trivesta can do, just because of our bench strength, is we cover a wide variety of industries. We always have somebody on the team who has experience in a
Wow.
specific industry, and they can say, how does your operation really stack up compared to benchmarks? How does your operation stack up compared to another company in that same industry? Augusta started out doing diligences, and now 50% of our revenue comes from diligence. The other 50% comes from operations improvements. The operations improvement team is comprised of continuous improvement, that is teams that deploy lean, Six Sigma, and all of the operations, like an operations management system at manufacturing and distribution companies. The other piece is supply chain consulting. I ladder up into the supply chain consulting because procurement is a key part of supply chain management. Yeah. So essentially, I'm doing very much what I was doing when I was independently consulting, and Trivis did happen to be a client of mine. And so when Travis said they were building up their procurement team, I was like, oh, that's fantastic fit.
But is it hard to be consultant, procurement consultant?
Yes. And I'll tell you why it is so hard. And I think we all, as procurement practitioners, talk about this a lot, which is, what is the value of a procurement team? It's so hard. You have that push and pull between, yes, I want to deliver cost savings. Yes, I want to impact the P&L, but also I'm so much more than that, right? Like there are so many more things, and mitigation is one of those things that comes to mind. Not always can you articulate the benefits of de-risking. Sometimes it's very straightforward. You're saying, okay, I am 100% dependent on this supplier. If the supplier were to go out of business, that's a 100% exposure. I really need to de-risk. You can kind of make that connection. But a lot of times, I think what procurement does is hard to articulate outside of the cost savings,
Wow.
right? And cost savings, to me, of course, they're important. And of course, that's what people hire procurement consultants for. That's what people hire procurement managers, teams for. It's like skimming the surface. And the challenge with being a procurement consultant is we can do so much more than,
Yeah.
just skimming that surface. You could even get cost savings by simply doing a best of three. I can just run a bid and get you cost savings, especially if you are a company that's been reliant on a handful of suppliers, like you've never studied the market. So that's like, to me, it's almost like that's so easy. Like and I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. You should absolutely do it. And if you need help doing it, you should absolutely hire a procurement consultant to do it. But there's so much more that
Yeah.
a professional can offer. Supplier performance management, for example, those are harder to do because those are mindsets. Those are operating systems that you have to be ready to invest time and effort in it. The hardest thing about being a procurement consultant is the exposure of most operations leadership teams on what good procurement looks like. The best procurement happens in the largest corporations where they have bandwidth, because good procurement comes with bandwidth. You need to be able to bifurcate the day-to-day purchasing activities from the strategic activities. A lot of times what I see is the companies that I work with don't typically have that luxury, right? So there's the same person straddling both of those, and that can get really hard, especially day-to-day priorities, typically firefighting roles, right? Like, you have to put out that fire because that's critical to your business. Being a procurement consultant is hard because you have to communicate your value in terms of the short term, the medium term, and the long term. Selling that medium term and long term values is hard.
And what is the biggest lesson you learned as a consultant? Do you have any example you can share?
That's an interesting one.
Or maybe success. It can be like successful example when you help the client.
Like,
Mhm.
I would say some of the biggest lessons for me have been this ability to articulate what a good procurement is, and the ability to articulate it in a way that doesn't scare people away. I don't want to go tell somebody you need 5 people to do this. And, here's a company that's sitting with one person, right? Yeah, you don't want to do that. Some successful examples that come to mind are relating to risk mitigation, right? Like, risk mitigation is a through and through. To me, that's a key deliverable for any procurement person. You have to make sure your supply sources are de-risked. It could be developing an alternate supplier. It could be even as basic as understanding your exposure, right? So to me, those are some of our most successful examples where it's not really been tied. Yes, sometimes, just during the course of alternate supplier development, you're introducing competition into the supply base and deliver cost savings, but that's not the primary goal of the exercise, right? Cost savings becomes a nice to have that happens during the exercise. I would say those are some of my more successful examples where we've successfully gone into a company that believed they don't have any options, right? They're completely tied to one supplier for 100% of their source, right? Like everything is tied to that supplier. It's a very risky position to be in, especially when you don't fully understand. So for example, right, one of our clients completely tied to the supplier. They had no idea how much the supplier depended on them, which is a very risky. What if you're sitting here assuming that your supplier has other client, but what if they don't? What if you are their main bread and butter? How stable is their business? And what about succession planning for their business? What does their team look like? How many countries are they operating in? Where is their manufacturing location? To not have answers to any of those questions and yet be dependent on a supplier. And sometimes, like, I see instances where clients don't know if they are working with a manufacturer or a distributor, especially when it's overseas. Like,
Wow.
especially when it's overseas, some of those supply chains tend to be opaque, right? So if you don't ask the questions, and if you don't ask the questions because you don't have the time or the bandwidth, because every procurement pro knows that it takes time to understand the full routing. Yeah. Now, I can say, having done this for nearly 20 years, that's the first question I will ask. I want to know if I'm going to take on a category, I want to know exactly where stuff is coming from. Where was this made? What goes into it? Where does it start from? Some of those are more successful examples where we've been able to effectively do supply market research, find alternates, and set up those alternates.
So let's talk about trends. And I love that question. What is the one trend or innovation in procurement that you think will be a game changing in the near future?
I'm going to talk about this in the context of what I see, right?
Okay.
So I know there is a lot of buzz around AI, right? There's a lot of buzz around, oh, this is really going to transform. But my ground level reality looks very, very different. My ground level reality is still, even in spite of all these workflow orchestration software suites and everything that's available, my ground level reality in manufacturing is still very much old school. I still see ERP systems that are SAP based, modules that are not deployed, a lot of pen and paper work, a lot of Excel spreadsheet. I think, and this is I'm very passionate about because this has been something from the time before software was so widely and cheaply available. So I've been around from that cheap available software days, right? So for me, when I look at it, I'm like, what is going to be revolutionary, especially for a lot of mid-market businesses that run from maybe 30, $40 million of revenue to $1 billion? I would say what's going to be powerful for them is spend analytics, right? Like having something that can help them at the push of a button understand what all of their spend is, and not just at a overall, yeah, like I have 20 suppliers or I have 500 suppliers, but understanding movements, right? Like purchase price variances within categories, like understanding similarities between categories. Because one of the things that I keep running into all the time is companies will have spend data. They're able to export it to Excel. They're able to have all of that, but they can't entirely categorize it, right? So what's the use of me looking at a bunch of different part numbers, not understanding if those part numbers actually have some commonality in trend, right? Like, are they resin based? If I can't understand that, if I can't really pinpoint to that, then what's the use of me looking at any trends? I need to be able to say how a bunch of my commodities will really move. I need to be able to do all of that. To me, that is what excites me. I'm saying, yeah, there are still a lot of companies that don't have spend analytics visibility, right? They don't fully understand because their item master is not great. They're not able to actually uncover insights that are meaningful and actionable. So to me, that's still, it's very old school. Even when I talk about it, I'm like, why am I not talking about AI? Because my ground reality is that
this is exactly where every company should start, because you cannot expect you will implement AI and it will fix all your problems. You need to understand the data, clean the data, and then you can implement great, fancy, modern AI tool and make a usage from that, right? That's step one that everyone has to do.
do you see this too? Do you agree?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of simplification, of cleaning data. The bigger client is, the bigger mess in their data. It's hard even to advise them on the best solution when they don't know where they stand on.
Exactly.
Crazy. So, few years ago, when I started my journey with LinkedIn, you were pretty active on LinkedIn. And this is how I got to know you.
Yeah.
And then somehow you disappeared. So, what happened? I always wanted to ask you that question. What happened?
Your notification settings? Maybe you accidentally unsubscribed. I would say one thing. So on LinkedIn, yes, I was fairly active. I would say when I started my own practice, my own procurement consulting practice in 2021. I started it in towards the end of 2021. So 2022, I was fairly active. I would say even a little bit of 2023. I think I was
Yeah.
fairly active all
Yeah.
through. I
You're
think maybe about 2 years.
Mm.
About 2 years. One of the things with social media content creation, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, right or wrong, put certain guardrails or certain rules around what I post and how I post. For me, the first thing I've realized is I have to feel like sharing something. At times, I've fallen into the trap of, okay, for the algorithm, you have to post every day, otherwise, you can disappear. So in I think maybe 2022, I was very religious. I was like, oh, I have to come there and I have to start posting every day. But I don't think I ever lasted more than 14 days of continuous posting. Right? It's almost like I cap out, right? I have nothing else to say. At times, it's also been that okay, for to be a good content creator, you also have to be a good content consumer. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. I don't have time.
Yeah.
I don't have time to listen to new ideas. It's listening to the new ideas, synthesizing it, figuring out how it applies to your work or to your field, and then pushing it out. Sometimes I don't have time to do that consistently and in a manner that I'm actually happy about what I'm doing. So anytime I felt the pressure to be too much, like anytime I feel, okay, I'm just posting just for just to be consistent, like, just to be out there, I take a step back. So I've taken a lot of steps back, especially, and now I know I'm starting to sound, I keep saying this now in the last month or so, I've said it a lot on my LinkedIn, either on my posts or on my comments. I've been saying the algorithm has really changed. It used to be, and I don't know if this is true or not, but this is my theory. It used to be that when you were not so consistent in your posting, but you were semi-consistent, right? So I was one of those people who would post 4 times a week. I always noticed that if I posted 4 times a week, I took a week off or I took like 5 days off, I came back. Somehow the algorithm was rewarding me a little bit, right? So it would say, oh, like here's a creator. And somehow those posts used to do well. Nowadays, it's no longer the case, right? So now he is getting much more rewarded. So it's like, even though I say, and that's why I call myself a little bit of a too, because I keep telling people, don't worry about the engagement. Like, don't worry about how many people are seeing your post. Like, that's not important. And I follow that for the most part when I have good content, right? Like, when I'm very happy with the content I've put out, I don't care how many people have seen it. But sometimes, like, there's also the element of encouragement, right? Like, there's the response. What that does is it tells you, yep, you're on the right track. More people want to hear from you, right? So when you don't see that encouragement, sometimes it can be like, especially when you have other priorities, right? Like conflicting with your time. Sometimes you're like, do I want to really spend hours building a carousel, putting it out there, not even reaching people? Sometimes you have to balance that trade off. And I think of late it's become more for me, at least it's become just with all my just with my work, with my family, with my personal goals for this year. It's become, yeah, I don't know that I have time to be so consistent. The short answer is your subscription. Like hit the bell.
I get that. I take that one. A lot of people think that when you are a creator on LinkedIn, it doesn't take so much time. We know that it's not true. You have to invest a lot of your time. And I don't know anyone from procurement that is content creator and posting every single day that would live from that. This is not full-time job. People are
Yeah.
doing that as a hobby or as a passion after hours. This is
Yeah.
not something that you can live from. So
No.
sometimes I receive not so nice comments about something that people do not agree with what I said. And I get it. You can agree, disagree, that's fine. But when I read through the comment, majority of the comments are about, it's too general. And like, you cannot write one post about everything what's going on in procurement, right? It's
No.
like,
No.
and as you said, sometimes you have that days when you have a lot of ideas and you are very happy with the content, but you have days when you don't.
When you're and yeah, for me the logic is very simple. If I don't have anything to say,
Well,
I'm not gonna say.
yeah.
I don't have anything to share.
And being a content creator and show up every single day and write something that is meaningful is super hard.
Very hard.
Yeah.
Very, very, very hard.
If there is someone that wants to meet you or hear you or talk to you in person, where is the best place to find you? Any upcoming events, conferences that you are planning to attend?
Good question. I am planning to be in LA for the Art of Procurement 1 day event. I'm gonna give you the details of that. That's happening next month. That's on May 6th in LA. So I will be attending that. Other than that, I don't have anything scheduled yet.
Yeah. I think I will publish it in May, so maybe it might be late for people.
Yeah,
to
probably.
do that.
Prob-
But okay, so maybe I will change the question. If Kate wants to have a face-to-face coffee with you, well,
yes.
we can meet.
Reach me on LinkedIn. I do meetups like all the time because I love our
Awesome.
community. I love our
Mhm.
community. I think the procurement community on LinkedIn especially is very authentic. I love setting
Very
up,
supportive.
very supportive. I can't tell you the number of times I've made friends on LinkedIn and then
Well,
texted them and called them just for a pick me up.
yeah.
Right. Hey, I need to talk about this. It's an amazing, unbelievable community. And I'm there for the same reason, right? When I
Mhm.
want to call somebody and they're able to pick me up, I want to be able to do the same for
Yeah.
somebody else. So yeah, anytime, reach me on LinkedIn. I am embarrassingly active on LinkedIn. Very responsive, as you know.
So now that you are back in full-time work, do you have any plans for your LinkedIn activity moving forward? Will we
Yeah.
see more posts or content from you again?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep posting as I
Awesome.
learn. These days my posts are much shorter. I don't do carousels anymore. The balance, the time and effort that it takes. I do a lot more posts based off of what I'm actually seeing, like ground level realities. I still try to keep up about 2 or 3 times a week when I can.
Looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
And is there any specific topic that you are passionate about procurement that you would like to write more about and share your experience with?
I would say risk mitigation, like that's
Well,
the number of time in those exercises, both as an industry practitioner as well as a consultant. To me, I still think it's very underutilized. People just need to make that a key priority for procurement. You've got to mitigate your risk. Like, you have to understand your supply chain exposure. You have to know where your stuff is coming from. The business continuity plan has to be in place. I've been in that boat too, caught off guard without alternate sources. Sometimes you can't help it because you're busy. Sometimes it'll be a critical item that is very hard to manufacture, that is, very proprietary. Sometimes it'll be those things, right? And all the more reason for us as procurement people to anticipate that and to have backup plans in place. So yeah, that's a passion topic for me. How do you effectively mitigate?
I love it. What I see, all our procurement community on LinkedIn, everyone is expert in a different field, and we are just, really fulfilling, each other,
Yeah.
supporting each other. So, for example, when there is risk management, I know that You are the one to call
Yeah.
when I need a help. I know there are few more people that are super expert in their own field because procurement is not one thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not one color. There is a lot of shadows in there. So
Absolutely.
awesome. 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 Thank you. I
Thank
enjoy
you. Thank
our
you for having me
conversation a
on
lot.
here.
Thank you.